I'm also a founding member of the committee.
I'm Gary Neal, the Director of Michigan Biomass, which is a coalition of the state's wood to electricity power generators.
Nick?
Hey, I'm Nick Milkevich. I'm the Flavor Supply Manager for First Odium Peninsula
And is Tim with us today?
Yes.
Oh, thanks.
Tim Beewood, looking forward to being a new member on the TAC, and with Beewood Lumber, and I'm Vice President of Beewood Lumber.
Thank you. You know, it's with, the whole goal was to get stakeholders that could actively address the issues. I mean, our whole goal with the department having the Timber Advisory Committee was to take the stumbling blocks out of the way so, you know, Michigan would become a destination, you know, for economic development and use the raw materials that we have in the state, you know, in this case, fiber. And it's, during the day, you're going to hear a lot of the accomplishments. I'm not going to go through them myself because that would, you know, we have people that spend a lot of time and energy looking at this. And, you know, it's with the governor and the director's foresight to put this committee together. And we've come a long, long ways. And you're going to see some of the payoffs that have come from their efforts. And, you know, there was a day when, you know, we didn't feel that we were going to be able to connect the dots. And we are connecting the dots, and it's been a real exciting time for all of us. And, you know, I always remember, and I used to tell the story about, you know, when I worked for a company based out of New York, and I came to Michigan, and I sat in the offices of state government and said I wanted to build some bio plants here. And the answer was all the things that were going to get in the way between myself and get, you know, in the state and getting the job done. And now when someone comes into the state and they want to invest money here, we have a pathway to tell them, hey, we have a stakeholder survey timber inventory that everybody agrees with. We have where it is within 75-mile radiuses. I think the Michigan Tech, MSU, and the department. We have places they go for they can go for marketing, and places they can go to look for how they can, you know, kind of investment packages they could get. And now they feel welcome instead of sitting there like you feel like you're semi-alienated. You want to come to Michigan. That was the whole goal when we put this together, and I think the people in our stakeholder group have done a really good job on getting that done. So I'm extremely excited to hear about what we have today. We appreciate all the support from everyone in here, and we have the chairman of the Public Service Commission, John. Thanks for coming to see us today. We really appreciate it. We have some exciting speakers, and with that, I'll have Bill open up the line.
Wow, what a great room. I echo JR's comments. It's nice. Twice in 2 years, we get together and spotlighted by the governor and talk what's good for forestry and forest resources across Michigan. That's pretty exciting. And when I talk to folks in the morning as you're walking in, how are things going, I get a lot of, they're going pretty good. We're talking, we're communicating, we're building relationships, forestry is moving forward, and I think we're going to hear that from Larry today and others when we report out on how did we do on these goals that we set a couple of years ago. So I think we've got a pretty strong agenda. We've got a lot of good and powerful speakers, and we're going to start with our director, Keith Cray, first. Keith's the director of the Department of Natural Resources. I say he's the right guy for the right time. He's really he's a natural resource leader. He's a problem solver. I know for working for him, if I go to identify a problem, he's expecting me to spend little time on the identification and lots of time on the solution. So it's fun to work under those criteria. He's an outdoorsman. He's a Michigan Tech grad in forestry. Where's Terry? There you go. So you won't listen to me anymore. Here's Keith to start us off today.
Give JR back his pen. I can't write. I'm a Michigan Tech grad.
Michigan's toughest university.
So my job's really be pretty brief this morning, and it's really good to be in a room full of friends. And as you know, I am a recovering forester, and it's a great spot to be. And, you know, my boss, the governor, he talks a lot about land-based industries, forestry, mining, agriculture. It's okay to make something in this state. It's okay to make a difference. So, because of scheduling conflicts, he wasn't able to be here today. He likes to make these summits. And so I'm gonna stop for a second, ask Nick to just do a little video presentation from the governor.
Good morning, and welcome to the second Forest Products Industry Summit. Today we'll continue the discussion we started in the spring of 2013 on ways to reinvent Michigan's business environment to support and encourage the growth of our forest products industry. Michigan's 20 million acres of forest land provide important wildlife habitat, offers a backdrop to world-class outdoor recreation, cleans our air and water resources, and provides a renewable supply of wood for our forest products industry. I want to thank Director Cray and the DNR, the Timber Advisory Council, and everyone attending today's summit for providing leadership and supporting and growing the forest products industry. I challenge you to continue your positive momentum, to work together, and to develop strategies and tactics that will allow you to accomplish your goals by 2018. Thank you for inviting me to be part of today's event, and have a great and productive summit.
So, what the governor always says is, don't have a nice meeting, have a productive meeting. And so let me just back up a little bit. So there was a time, and I do have to say thanks. Thanks to the industry. Thanks to JR, he was pretty humble in his comments. JR's provided great leadership on forestry issues. And he did that as chair of the NRC, he does it as a commissioner of the NRC. And I really appreciate JR's leadership to make sure we're paying attention to the fundamentals. Bill O'Neill, as I say, he can actually start a chainsaw. He understands harvesting techniques, and he spends time in the woods. It's nice to have a chief that understands the fundamentals. The Timber Advisory Committee, they help us get it right. And I can remember a couple of fairly pointed conversations with the Timber Advisory Committee in my short time. And it's good. It's good to be able to disagree. It's good to be able to have those honest conversations. It's good to make sure that the innovation happens around the tension points. And that's really something that is appreciated. And that's something that we, as state government, need to do better. It's okay. It's okay to have those honest conversations. It's okay to make sure that we're getting it right. You live it every day. And so as we talk about what we accomplished, it's really what we helped you accomplish. Because if you don't get the fundamentals right, it doesn't matter what we do. So you gotta have energy. You gotta have transportation. You gotta have talent. You gotta have a wood basket. You gotta be a good neighbor. You gotta make sure that we're actually having meaningful conversations. And so part of the challenge today is, let's feel good about what we got done. But let's figure out what we're gonna do long term for the industry. Because it's gonna get more complex, not less. Fragmentation will continue to occur. Demand on the resources, multiple use. And it's gonna really be, how can we make sure people understand our story? One thing that I like about Bill O'Neill, he says the other day, well, I want to start this initiative and talk about the positive aspects forestry has on the landscape. Think about that. And he says, you know, my friends in agriculture, they look at a farmer next door and say, boy, this is nice. Contributing to community, making a difference in the community. And it's a positive land use practice on the landscape. Why aren't we saying that about forestry? Why is it the first time that we go and clear cut in 80, someone calls up and says, you clear cut in 80, what are you doing? And so as we have that conversation, I think it's a great time to do that. Because you have support from the governor, to the industry, to the local communities that are saying, how can we make a difference? As we cite a new processing plant, and we'll talk about that later on today. I mean, the first question I got was, wait, you're gonna cut more timber. That's gonna be a problem in the headwaters of the Asabo. My response was, well, let's talk about that a little bit. Let's talk about young, healthy forests. Let's talk about the mortality rate. Let's talk about making sure we pay attention to forest pests. How about spruce budworm? How are you gonna manage for KW if you don't have a market for jack pine? And we don't tell that story enough. And there is a reason why, as I travel nationally and other individuals are either on fire or in court, It's because they don't tell their story and they don't have good forestry practices. Overly simplistic, guilty. But I think fundamentally, as people get more removed from natural resources, that's a challenge. And it's a challenge in all the land-based industries, forestry, mining, and agriculture. And so, as a group, there is great power in that group. And I will submit that you will never lose an argument, you'll never lose an issue, if indeed you have a comprehensive approach. So, with that, the only other person I was supposed to thank is Dr. Larry Liefers, because he's actually going to inform the conversation today. He put in a lot of time, energy, and effort looking at the economics, and that's important, because as I travel across the street to the Capitol, I'm always asked about economics and impact, and what's the real difference. And so Dr. Liefers really did a nice job of putting that so even a recovering forester can understand it. So Larry, thanks a lot, and we'll look forward to your presentation today. So with that, I do not see John Walsh in the room. And John Walsh was supposed to be on the program, and I'll say his apologies. So John is the governor's policy lead. Bill Rustin, most people knew Bill Rustin. Bill left, John came in. John's doing a great job. John's the lead is education. And if you notice today, I think the emergency manager for Detroit school systems in town, and I think they're trying to figure out the economics of the Detroit school system. So I'm assuming John's knee-deep in alligators. And so with that, I'll pass the microphone back to Bill O'Neill. Thanks.
Okay. Okay, well, we're going to take a left turn from the agenda, which shouldn't surprise anyone. But I'm going to ask Ron Salisbury from Michigan Forest Products Council and Potlatch to come up because, and Scott, why don't you come up too? We've got an award that Ron is going to tell us about, quite a prestigious award, and he'd like to give it to Keith. So we thought this was a great time to do it. So Ron from Potlatch and Michigan Forest Products Council.
Good morning, everybody. I've got the best job today to present the Tuber Award to Director Cray for his excellent leadership and support of our industry. We've got the plaque that goes on the wall, and I'm going to read the plaque as it's written. Michigan Forest Products Council would like to present the Honorable Tuber Award to Director Keith Cray in recognition of his distinguished leadership and dedication to the state of Michigan. Emblazoned on the official state seal reads Tubor, meaning I will defend. The Tubor Award is presented to an individual who, through his or her leadership, has demonstrated commitment to the integrity of Michigan's natural resources and whose legacy has sought solutions to problems faced by those who depend on the state's natural resources. Director Cray has demonstrated these qualities mentioned above by striving to protect, promote, sustain the forest products industry across the state of Michigan. To acknowledge this outstanding work on behalf of the forest products industry, we respectfully present this plaque in recognition of his service. When you listen to Director Cray's opening comments, you understand why he is most deserving of this award. Great job. Thank you for your leadership.
Thanks.
Wait a minute, one more.
One more. One more. Yeah, thanks. Yeah, if I could just make a comment, Ron and Scott. Certainly, I'm honored and humbled to receive that award, and I say that in all honesty. I'm really accepting on behalf of the staff that does great work. As you run down the list, it doesn't matter if it's Bill or Deb or Dave or David, and there's a number of people in the room that I won't call out singularly, but really the staff in the field. They are real passionate and committed. And as I say, I'm really lucky to be director of a department that cares about the resource, and they do a great job. So I thank you for this award. We'll hang it in the office and be proud of it. Thanks.
Well, I'll say that I'll give Keith a compliment back. It's nice to have forestry in the governor's office for all the right reasons, and I think we're in the governor's office for all the right reasons. So the only sidestep he had was probably the first person he hired when he was the director of the Department of Natural Resources, who or which you are looking at. So. We're going to move right along. We'll just move up the agenda. We may have a little bit more time for questions. So our next speaker is Dr. Larry Liefers, a friend and colleague. Larry started off worked for the Forest Service, many degrees. You have the bio in your packet. Has had a great career at Michigan State. He's doing some consulting for us, still teaching a couple of classes. What Larry's done for us was just fabulous work and what the universities are doing. So where are we? Where is forestry in Michigan? Is it 14 billion? Is it 16 billion? Is it 20 billion? And is it a credible entity that's giving us that baseline? So then we can measure ourselves, because we do need to measure ourselves. So we're doing really good work. So we need to measure how much work, and then as Keith says, we got to talk about it. We're helping the governor and Michigan move forward. We're helping drive the economy. And the nice thing about our business is we drive the economy in Ontonagon, we drive the economy in Gaylord, we drive the economy in Monroe. We're rural, we're urban, we're manufacturing, we're logging, we're all the entire spectrum. So having somebody like Larry says to tell us with a professional study, this is who we are, this is what we do, this is how much, this is where, is really good work. So we appreciate that, Larry. Larry's going to come up and tell us about the latest study and help define a little bit of who we are and what we do. So, Dr. Larry Liefers.
Put my glass there and hope that I don't spill it on the computer. I have a bit of a cold, so I'll try to speak loudly enough so everyone can hear me. But I do want to mention that I've tried to follow the garb that the governor wore. You notice I don't have a tie on today. Last night I was talking to my wife. I said, you know, which tie do you think I should wear? And she said, the governor doesn't wear ties. I said, oh, problem solved. It's good to have problem solvers in the world. Well, I want to thank the Timber Advisory Council and others who have put together this summit for inviting me to speak. And I have some real passion for this. A couple of years ago, I was in a position as I moved toward the end of my career at Michigan State University, thinking, what things do I want to still work on? And one of the things that struck me was we really need more effort on the forest products industries here in Michigan. So because of the flexibility, the support at Michigan State, I've been able to pursue that, and the DNR has been very supportive of that as well. So it's really great to move forward on these things and hopefully share some good information for you. So in your packet, you should have a handout. It's a 2-page handout that covers some of the material I will touch on today. In the near future, this presentation and the paper or report upon which it was based will be available from the DNR website. So there's a lot more detail than what you're going to see today. I brought mostly pictures, but there will be more numbers and data than you probably want to see as I move forward. Let's see how this. So I just want to acknowledge a couple things. First, I want to thank the DNR and Michigan State University for their financial support in moving this particular project forward. And also Dave Newman. Where's Dave? Back there in the corner. Dave, for overseeing this project that you're going to see results of today. Dave has been very helpful. He points out things and says, Larry, this doesn't make sense, or Larry, here's how you write this so that people understand what you're saying. He hasn't made any corrections since yesterday. So it's been very helpful as we moved along. So The next thing I want to mention is to provide a little context for this. And if you go back, or if we go back to 2013, there were 5 goals that were developed at the summit that year. The first of these was increasing economic impact of the timber industry to up to $20 billion. Now the 14 billion happened to be the number that we had available at that time. It's since been revised. As I've learned more, as we refine some of our analysis methods, that's changed, and I'll get to that in a few minutes. The second goal was increasing export of value-added forest products by 50%. The third was increasing forest products-related careers by 10%. And then the final 2 were supporting existing industry and encouraging regionally based industry development. I'm going to focus on these first 3. We've quantified this, we spent some time pulling data together and so on, and much of the rest of today's summit will focus on those last 2, which I think are the important parts. You know, it's one thing to compile data and to share how we're progressing, but what's really important, as we've heard, are the actions we're taking to move the forest products industry forward here in Michigan. So a couple different data sources. You know, after the 2013 summit, I approached Bill O'Neill and said, you know, Bill, this is nice. We have this memo that shows that we have these 5 goals, but what are we doing? How are we trying to quantify and track those? And so we came to an agreement that we would pursue a first report, a baseline report. And that report was pulled together by myself, Larry Peterson. Is Larry here? Yeah, Larry Peterson, Karen Potter-Witter, Karen back there, Mike Vasevich, Mike, where are you? And Runxing Yen, who's currently, I believe, in India. And so we're all forest economists, and so we have a lot in common, and we pulled this report together as a starting point. You'll note that the title was Michigan's Forest Products Industry, Centerpiece of the Green Economy. And I think that that's the role we should see ourselves in. It's not the green economy such as going out and hugging trees. I do that. I suspect a lot of people in here hug trees. We love trees. But it's the fact that it's a natural resource-based, a living entity that we are taking and utilizing for the betterment of our society. And that's about as green as you can do, you know, especially as you renew that resource, and we should be very proud of that. The second data source comes from a piece of software and a data set called Implant. Now we have a colleague, an old friend, Greg Allward, who's sitting up front here. He'll be talking later today, and he's one of the originators, developers of Implant many years ago. And he's been involved in it, so he's been very helpful as we move forward. But this is a data set and a model that pulls together various sources of government data from the Census Bureau, the Bureau of Economic Analysis, and so on, compiles it, and allows us to do analysis in a very efficient way, and that's what we're learning to do. Then finally, I pulled together some trade data from Department of Commerce and from the Census Bureau. So that's what I'm going to share with you, and I simply wanted to highlight those data sources. So let's look at some of the figures. So as we look at this track of Bureau of Economic Analysis, BEA data, this is historic data on full-time and part-time employment. So they don't transfer this into full-time equivalents. There's part-time jobs or full-time jobs that are counted. And when you go back to 1990, you look at 1995 and 2000, and you look at the levels in forestry and logging, you look at the level in wood product manufacturing and in paper manufacturing, you can see they're much higher than the levels we have today. We all know this. The industry has declined a lot since the end of the last century. But we can also look at this and see that in recent years, at least in forestry and logging and in wood products manufacturing, there's been an uptick. We're seeing more and more employment. And I'm showing this slide in part because this has 2014 data. This is the most recent available. Well, unfortunately, when you work with government data, you have to be patient. You know, it might take a year, might take 2 years before the data is out, and that's sadly one of the realities. So it's hard for us to track what are we doing in 2014 right now, or where's that data across the board? It's not there yet. And where are we in 2015? Well, wait until late 2016 and we'll tell you. And so that's one of the shortcomings of using this sort of data. Nonetheless, it's the best available. I have an arrow here on 2014 because much of the rest of the data we're going to see deals with 2013. So I just want to mention that. But the trend here is positive, and it's really good. We're watching a growth in the forest products industries. I will note that paper has been flat for some time and probably will continue along that track. So now I want to talk just briefly about industries. About a little more than a year ago, the Timber Advisory Council met, and at that meeting, one of the things we discussed was, okay, how are we going to describe the forest products industries, plural, in Michigan? There's not one industry, there are many industries that come together. And these are the 7 categories we came up with: forestry, logging, primary solid wood products and wood-based power, secondary solid wood products, wood furniture, primary paper and paperboard products, and secondary paper and paperboard products. So those are the 7, but they're built from the bottom up. So we just didn't create these and say, here's what they are. In fact, what we did was we identified the various economic sectors. So this is an industry, sorry for the language. So underneath that, undergirding that are the sectors. And so as an example, here is the forestry industry and the logging industry. And you can see that under forestry, it calls it forestry, forest products, timber tract production, support activities for forestry. These include consultants. If they're private nurseries, they would be under this kind of category. And there's a little red asterisk there because the data that comes to us from IMPLAN actually combines support activities for agriculture and forestry. So we have to go through some splitting to pull out just the forestry component, but we can do that. And that's part of what we've done over the last year or so. And then there's commercial logging as well, as its own sector and its own industry. So this is kind of the bottom up. Here are a couple more. This is on the solid wood products. You can see some numbers in parentheses. One of the other challenges of data from the government, it changes over time. So there's a classification scheme. For those of you who are my age, you remember the Standard Industrial Classification Code, SIC code. Well, a number of years ago, that was replaced by the North American Industrial Classification System. And that's called NAICS. And NAICS is the basis for the IMPLAN sectors. But when you look at all of this, you can see that some of these numbers have changed. They've actually gotten more detailed by and large for the forest products industry. So the analysis we can do is improved by some of the changes that have been made. And one example, if you look on here, about halfway down, you can see the electric power generation biomass. In 2012, there was no sector called that by NAICS. Then they added it. So now Gary Milo and others are identified in this kind of classification scheme. There are other sort of cryptic titles in here. So if you look at, let's see, it's the 4th one down, reconstituted wood product manufacturing. What the heck is that? Well, that's particle board, OSB, those sorts of products. So all of those are involved in defining these industries from the bottom up. Wood furniture, it's much the same as the others. There are certain sectors that go into that. Wood office furniture manufacturing, for example, there are a couple with asterisks because they have wood and non-wood components. Part of our process was identifying how to split those out. And then finally, primary paper and paperboard products and the secondary paper products as well. So this is how we build it from the bottom up. This is the data. This is all described in excruciatingly exciting detail in the report. You can pick that up later. Now it gets really dense. Okay, I'm a little reluctant to go over this, but first, I've already confessed it. I'm a forest economist. And forest economists use different terms to describe economic activity. And in particular, what we're going to be talking about is economic contributions. And so it's essentially the role the forest products industries play in Michigan's economy. This is important. It's important for us. It's important for legislators. It's important for local communities. We need to understand this role that we play. So there are a couple things to start out. First, there are various terms that are used to describe that economic contribution, and a few of them are listed here. Output, which is the same as sales, so how much did we sell from various sawmills? How much did we sell from Beaver? You know, all of these things go into the sales or output that we have. It's employment associated with it, the income that folks have, not only who are employees, but who are self-employed. And then another term, value added, which I'll come back to in a bit. So that's one level of looking at it. So those are the contributions. And then there's a little black bar there that says, then we talk about what are known as direct effects. So if you work for a mill and you're employed there, you're counted and tallied with that mill and you have a direct job. If you're supplying that mill, with respect to that mill, you would be considered an indirect, you'd have an indirect role, so that's an indirect job that would be associated with that. Both the people who work in the mill and the people who supply the mill receive salaries or wages, and then they go around and they spend that on local restaurants and other things, and that is referred to as induced effects. So this is tough. This is like or economics 101, but it's a very short course today, and we're almost done with it. So we pull all this stuff together, and in particular, the indirect and induced effects we often refer to as the ripple effect. So, okay, how many jobs do you have in your firm? How many jobs, additional jobs, does that support? What's the ripple effect? So that's what we're going to be talking about. So the class is over. Now we're going to get on and look at some of the results. First, I want to step back and look at the big picture. And as we look at the big picture in Michigan, when we go through all this analysis and data summary, there are about 35,000 direct jobs in Michigan in the forest products industries. That's that first column, employment. When we consider the ripple effects, that expands up to about 87,000 jobs. So when we talk about how many jobs does the forest products industry or the forest products industry support, the response would be about 87,000 jobs. And that's in the local bakeries, that's in the other people who might be supplying from different other sectors. That's all included in that area. Then we have similar information here for output. So there's about $10.2 billion in direct output. But when you look at the ripple effect of the sales or output, that adds up to about $17.8 billion. And these are in 2013 dollars. Labor income is a part of this, and so you can see in direct labor income, it's about $2 billion in the state's economy. And again, as you look and see how that expands, it's about $4.5 billion. So these are some of the aggregate big numbers, and that's nice. And these are good to share with people and say, this is the role our industries have in the state of Michigan. So when we look at our goals, one of our goals is to increase output to the impacts of the forest products industry to $20 billion. So this is at the total contribution. This is the direct plus the ripple effect. Right now it's about $17.8 billion. And so our goal is to get that up another $2 billion plus in sales. We have a few years to do it. We're going to need them. Another one of the goals we have relates to increasing jobs. So right now there are roughly 35,000 jobs, so that 10% increase would be about 3,500 additional jobs from our starting point. So this gives you a little bit of background on where we are in the big picture. And now I want to break it up into those industries a bit, just to show you some facts and mostly figures here about where we are. So this particular graph is one of several I'll be showing you that shows the total amounts for these various industries for some of the different measures. And this one happens to be output and sales measured in millions of dollars. So at the very top, you will see the dark blue line shows the secondary paper and paperboard products has the highest level of sales across the industries statewide. And that would be, it's a little over $3 billion. Now that's followed by the primary paper sector, or industry rather, and then by wood furniture and so on. Then you can see the lighter blue bars that show the ripple effects, if you will, at that. But that gives you a sense of the relative magnitude of these different industries. If we look at employment, the picture shifts around somewhat, and it's actually the wood furniture industry that has the largest number of direct jobs. But when we look at the add-on, the ripple effect, you can see that number 2, secondary paper, overtakes the wood products because there are more linkages to other sectors. That's the reason for that. So this gives you somewhat of a sense of the relative level of these industries. I want to stay on the labor theme or the employment theme for a minute here. And in this, it's cut off a bit at the top. I must have pushed the wrong arrow here. Anyone know what I do with X stop presenting and up at the top? Can you?
It's going to stay on there.
Okay, it's going to stay on there.
You don't want me up there.
No, I don't want you. Actually, JR, I was looking over you.
I know.
No, I don't want you. You're right, JR. At any rate, this is the direct employment in percentage terms in each of the regions in Michigan. And by this, when we look at the Western UP, it has 4.3%. That's 4.3 of the public and private sector jobs in the Western UP. So it has the highest percentage, so 4.3%. As we move to the Eastern UP, it's about 3.2% of the jobs. Northern Lower Peninsula is 1%. Southern Lower Peninsula is about 1/2 of 1%. I should point out that these red bars that I draw through here, these are the planning regions that Forest Resources Division uses. So this is actually being developed, a smaller set of reports on each region so that they can use it in their planning at the regional level. And one of the things you'll note in the Central UP is that the red line there doesn't correspond exactly to their forest management units. Our data and our analysis has to correspond to counties, and so it's moved over a little, but not too much. Otherwise, they align pretty well. So statewide, just to give you a sense, oops, okay, now I am in trouble. I'm gonna have to, it's become unresponsive for me, so.
What slide do you need?
I need the first click on this slide. Are you giving me control back, or?
You should just be able to do the arrow.
There we go. Okay, we're back. Okay, so statewide, it's about 0.7 of 1% of all jobs are in the forest products industries. This isn't the indirect and induced jobs. This is the direct jobs. Looked at another way, looking at the actual number of jobs, this is what the picture is. So in the Eastern UP, which incidentally only has 3 counties, and it's a fairly sparsely populated counties at that, there are about 1,100 jobs in the forest products industries. If we move to the the Northern Lower Peninsula, you can see there are about 4,500 jobs. We move to the Western UP, about 5,000. So what do you think that leaves? That leaves us here some of us here in southern Michigan, and the total here is about 24,000 jobs. You know, you've heard me and others say this before. Often when we think about the forest products industries, we think about up north. But the reality is, and we all know this, the forest products industries are all over the state, in every county. We don't do a good job of pointing this out. I hope the legislators from southern Michigan realize this is really where the concentration of a lot of jobs are in the forest products industries. Not in a percentage standpoint, but in total. So in total here, there are about 35,000 jobs, again, going back to that. And this is how they're distributed. And we have a lot of more detail, but I just wanted to give you a sense. This is how it plays out across the state. And we need to get this type of information out to people and decision makers of various sorts. So I'm going to move back to the statewide picture, and you can see this is labor income, direct and total labor income by forest products industry, and it mirrors what we saw in employment. So wood furniture is number 1, followed by the secondary paper. So that's the sort of background we have. You know, occasionally it's nice to compare yourself with others. You know, we heard the director, you know, mentioning Department of Ag, and certainly we have Donna from MDARD and others, Steve and others from MDARD here. And so we pulled together a little data to show how the forest products industry stacks up against some other natural resources sector. So it's not surprising to those of us in Michigan to look at the commercial fishing, hunting, and trapping industry and say it's not very big, we know that. The recreational industry maybe, but not the commercial industry. And so it's fairly small, and you can see it here in terms of the sales they have and the value added, which is very, very small. Mining and oil and gas production, smaller than the forest products industry. And the third one I put up here is agricultural production. Now these are the farmers we were talking about. This is not Kellogg. This is the farmers, this is a production agriculture. So I don't want to, you know, give you the idea that forest products industry is larger than agriculture writ large, the processing and the harvesting and processing. But this is just at the production level. So we have about 10.2 billion here in Michigan for forest products industry. Then there's this other notion here that's presented, it's called value added. So you're all familiar with gross national product. And there's also a gross state product. And the gross state product in Michigan in 2013 was $439 billion. The forest products industry only made up 2.7 billion of that. So a fairly small percent, but important nonetheless. You know, you can look across a lot of industries and they don't do nearly as well as we do in the forest products industry. You can see that agricultural production is larger in terms of value added. If you look at the value added across all the different industries and add them up, that's where we get the gross state product. Economists use value added. The rest of us use something like sales. You know, when we look at output and sales, it's each time there's a transaction, we count it. So if you're a logger and you purchase stumpage, that person you bought that from, that was a sale, that's revenue that they got. That logger sells the log to the mill, they get money, we count that as a sale. And onward up to the board and eventually to furniture or whatever it becomes. For value added, the way it's approached is you don't double count in a sense, so that if you've already bought that log and you're going to sell that log to the mill, all you count is the incremental value you've added, which would be the transportation and the labor and et cetera that gets it. That's the increment you're adding. So that's the reason the number is larger than the sales. The sales includes all transactions. Value added only includes the increment. So enough forest economics for this morning. But I just wanted to give you a sense of that's the reason these are different. Some people like value added because of its additivity to the gross state product. Others like the sales data because it shows what's going on in the economy itself. Okay, so I'm going to move on. I'm going to transition into information on imports and exports. And here, if we look at the figure, what I've done is I've pulled together some comparable data that we can look at for the year 2012. And the reason we're using 2012 is that the Census of Manufacturers, which comes out every 5 years, has domestic trade included in it. It's not annual data that's available, so it's periodic data that's available. And 2012 is the most recent year. This particular figure does not include the logging sector or logging industry, doesn't include the forestry industry, and doesn't include the furniture industry. So this is only the wood products and paper combined. And in 2012, that was about $7.9 billion. Of that $7.9 billion, about $5.2 billion was in domestic exports. I mean, it goes to other states around the US. About $500 million was for international exports. So the number one, destination, if you will, the number one market for products made in Michigan are other states, followed by the state of Michigan. So if you subtract all of these exports out, that's what's left for the state of Michigan. And then the third area is international exports. We can look at some of the trends for wood products, paper, and furniture in terms of exports. These are international exports in this particular case. And you can see that by and large, they're trending upward. I do want to highlight, often I don't include the top bar here, the furniture and fixtures, because on the export data, at least I have not yet been able to find out how to extract out the wood-only component of that. We can do that in some of the implant data, but I haven't figured out quite how to do that in this data set. But you can see overall they're trending upward. Now, Donna LaCourte from IMDART is going to go into a lot more detail and not only some of the data, but some of the programs and efforts that are underway to expand forest products exports, and she'll be talking about that in a little bit. My only point here that I want to make is that our #1 destination is Canada, our next door neighbor. Speaking of next door neighbor, I'm sorry. See, I have lots of notes too, JR, but I don't follow them.
You want to borrow some of mine?
But what I want to highlight here is, so that's the export side. There's also the import side for those same industries. And if you look at this, and you don't get too dizzy, and you go back and forth, the axes are the same. But one of the things you'll note is that the exports are lower than the imports, which makes us a net importer of wood products at the aggregate level. And what that means from an economic standpoint is we have to look for opportunities to substitute Michigan products for those imported products. That's something to think about, import substitution. So yeah, we can expand other markets, but we can look at expanding the markets here in Michigan as well. It's important to do. So now I want to talk a little bit about the domestic exports. So this is going to other states. And the picture is kind of like the international picture. Our neighbors tend to get most of it. So if you look at this figure, the total amount of domestic exports from the wood products industry was about $1.4 billion in 2012. The comparison, I think the international exports in this sector was about 146 million, so about 1/10 of this amount. But you can see the closest destinations, Indiana, Wisconsin, Illinois, Ohio, those are our pretty close neighbors, and that's where we ship a lot of our material. If we look at paper, it's a much larger sector than the wood products in terms of domestic exports. And again, it shows this trend of here. We send a lot to Wisconsin, Ohio, Indiana, so some of those regional markets are very valuable for us. So as we expand opportunities, not only at the international level, we also have these opportunities at the regional level. Then finally, I want to kind of pull all this together and bring the presentation to a close. Started out by talking about the goals that we've set for the forest products industries. One of them had increasing the impacts to $20 billion. So if we look at this figure, the first data that we had, and this was from the previous summit where we set that as the baseline, was in 2012. On the far right of each of these parts of the figures, you'll see the taller green bar. You know, I use Spartan green because we're good at reaching our goals. You know, at least on the football field, right? So when you look at this figure and read it, if we start with the far right, you can see the exports, the increase desired is up to 150%. And so that green bar is set at 150. We started at 100, and you can see that we've been incrementally increasing the amount of exports where we have data to show. In the middle bar, you can see employment, and it seems to be on track, and we haven't compiled the 2014 data from IMPLAN yet, but probably in about 2 months, we'll have that data set and we'll update this sort of figure. We're on a nice track to meet that employment goal. The overall output or sales has been fairly flat. So that looks like it's going to be a challenge, but again, we're just starting this, and this is lagging a couple years. I think most people in here realize the forest products industries are doing better now than they were a couple years ago, and certainly way better than they were 5 years ago. So things are getting better, and as the data comes available, we'll be sharing that with all of you. And unfortunately, that data lags. It just doesn't quite keep up with us. So, and in closing, we know that we have to do these things. We need to, in order to meet the goals, it's sort of self-fulfilling. We need to increase sales. We need to look at import substitution and increase that, and increase exports. And then, of course, we need to have policies that support, the existing industry and growth in some of our regional economies. And that'll be much of the rest of the talk. Now, one way of thinking about this, if for example, in Michigan, we bring in a new mill, it could be a board mill, it could be some other sort of mill. One of the things they're going to do once they get online is sell more, right? So the output's going to go up. If they're producing products that are used in Michigan that we currently export or we import from others, they're going to play a role in import substitution. And of course, if they're producing enough, they're going to be exporting it to other states and internationally. So this all ties together. And frankly, what I've looked at, it's a very positive story. So I think we're making good progress, and I look forward to watching this and helping on this over the next couple of years. So with that, I'd like to invite Bill O'Neill to come up and wrap things up. In my talk, I've tried to touch on the first 3 goals and highlight some of the facts and figures for you. And Bill's going to make a transition now to our next speaker. Bill?
Hold on, Larry. So the format today is, if we have time, we'll entertain a few questions, and we do have a little bit of time, so thought we might take a moment. If anybody has some questions for Larry or his presentation, let's take 5 minutes and talk a little bit about it.
Sure.
And you're going to have to speak up. We do have a mic if we want to run them around. Let's try just speaking up with the question. If it doesn't work, we'll use a mic.
Yes, Ray.
So I'm Ray. State University. Thank you, Larry, for summarizing this great project you've been working on. And it occurred to me, as you suggested, that one of the things we should be looking to do is increase import substitutions. I wondered if from the data that you have that shows how much forest products and paper products are being exported from Michigan, can you tell what those products are being used for once they're exported, so that we know what to concentrate on building within Michigan to take those products back?
Let me defer that question to Dr. Greg Allward. Greg, I want to introduce one of our friends and colleagues, Greg Allward, who will be speaking later. As I mentioned earlier, Greg knows more than perhaps anyone in the country how these data work together and some of the limitations and opportunities of the data, if you don't mind, Greg.
Yeah, just very quickly, I was answering saying, yeah, I think we could shed some light on it, and this afternoon when I did a talk, I'll remind you of that, but that is a point that I want to bring up when we talk about the structure of the Michigan forest economy, forest products economy, and how it works.
Yeah, and related to that, the way this modeling and analysis works is there what are called production functions. So it shows how each sector is linked to each other sector. And so you can look at those sorts of things, and part of it involves imports and exports as well. So we'll talk about that a little later. Are there other questions that I can answer? Dr. Vasevich?
Yeah, I was very surprised that the international exports were as low as they were.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe Donna will reflect on that a bit. But it seems that, is there, in your mind, is there some particular reason why they're that low, or other than perhaps international exchange rates, which certainly is a big factor right now. And what could be done about it?
Yeah. Donna, I guess, one thing we could wait for Donna to talk about exports, but one of it, of course, one aspect of that, of course, is location. We're in the center of a continent. We aren't on the edge of a continent. And if you're on the edge, your opportunities for exports grow. And, we certainly have pathways, but Larry Peterson wants to comment.
Yeah, I was going to follow up both of those questions.
Yeah.
And this might be to Greg, but often international exports are only direct international exports. And so there's a lot more that are going to other states that end up being internationally exported. So that's major reason why that shows up so low.
Yeah, they've tried, though, in more recent census data to account for that and look at, recognize the transshipment effect that you're talking about, right?
Okay, but that's.
Yeah, that could be part of it, right?
Good.
Jared?
Now, when you're delving into this data, you know, and I always think when I look at it, what can we use it for? What do we, you know, what do we do with it? And one of the things that I think about is who should we compare it to, or how can, you know, is there a state or a country or is there someone we should be looking at and seeing the gap and seeing how we can close that gap? Or, you know, how could we use that same data compared to someone who we visualize is doing it right and see what we can do to put ourselves in that position?
Yeah, actually, there'll be 2 talks later today dealing with this very question. You know, how do we stack up against others? How do we rank? You know, Mark, where are you? Mark's in the back. Oh, back here. Mark will be talking later today about how we stack up against other states. Greg Allward in his presentation will show us how Michigan's industries are doing relative to their own pathway of growth over the last few years and how they're stacking up nationally. And then you can look somewhat at, okay, how are we doing relative to others? What I've shown here is really just a Michigan-centric perspective.
Yeah, the gap analysis,
right.
And how do we take that step?
Right.
And, yeah, we've talked about it at depth. That's why it comes, you know, it's obviously why it comes out in your thing. But, you know, when you're wading through that, do you have any eureka moments ever?
Yeah.
Because I couldn't imagine going through all that.
Yeah. But getting to, you know, your question of like, who do we share this with? Well, partly we share it with each other, so we kind of have an idea. You know, the Michigan Forest Products Council is central to doing this. The Michigan DNR, IMDAR, they're all central to kind of sharing this sort of information with various groups, whether it's legislators and others that say, here is the role we play. It's an important role, and we just need, one of the things I wanted to do was help build that consistent, repeatable foundation to say, here's our situation. So next year we can go through the same analysis, we can show how we're progressing toward goals and so on.
Here's what we're worth to the state, and here's why we're important.
Right, and we'll be showing that in some of these regional reports, how important is it in the western UP and the eastern UP, and it'll be broken down by industry, so we have a sense of, you know, is logging more concentrated, and it likely is, in the western UP versus the southern lower, where we're going to have a lot of secondary manufacturing, furniture manufacturing taking place. And we'll see, you know, for example, I think in the eastern UP, there is no furniture manufacturing, at least it showed up in the data. You know, it's one example.
So there's one of the questions over there.
Yes, Terry.
Yeah, Larry. In your data, in terms of this regionalization within Michigan, it sounds like you may have information in terms of, let's say, median family household income. I'm thinking about, you know, the relationship between that and these jobs, like in the
right.
Western UP, and then also the wages that are earned.
Right.
Obviously, in terms of understanding this regionally started.
Sure.
It sounds like you have that.
That is available. I haven't written it into reports, but indeed, yeah, you can look at basically the financial breakdown or the economic breakdown of different, you know, lower income, middle income, higher income families, and so on in this sort of analysis. I just haven't done that. Yeah. Yes.
Hi, I just wanted to clarify, you compared the forest products industry to commercial hunting, fishing, and trapping. And I just wanted to clarify, the data here does not really take into account any of the other activities that happen on forested land, which might be hunting, fishing, trapping, trails, other recreation, tourism.
Yes, correct. Yeah, this is for the forest products industries, and it goes from the log basically through the finished product. When I showed agriculture, it simply was the on-farm sales, if you want to look at it that way. And the commercial fishing, hunting, and so on, that would just be, you know, I'm not sure, I haven't looked exactly at the data, but it's fairly small. We have a very small commercial fishing industry, for example. I'm not sure we have a commercial hunting activity here, but this does not include any of the recreational uses. This is something we're talking about in a future study, perhaps doing, looking at really the disparate uses of our forest to support all sorts of economic activity. And that's not reflected here. the forests are much more valuable than the forest products industry.
So Bill, one more question?
It's encouraging to see the progress toward the goals for 2018. Can you tie any of this progress to anything we've done?
Okay, time to go.
You know, it's funny, Bill. You know, we had a Timber Advisory Council meeting today, earlier this year, and that same question came up. And my response is what we're looking at mostly right now is as the U.S. economy improves, housing starts to improve, et cetera, we're seeing it kind of across the board. Forest products industries are improving. If you think back, you know, in 2013 we had our first summit. About the first data we have here is from 2013, and so we really aren't seeing the effects of any particular policies occur yet. But some of the talks later today will get into some of that nitty-gritty. That here's what we're doing in the export markets. Here's what we're doing working with industries. Doesn't show up yet in this aggregate data, Bill. So unfortunately, we have to wait and be patient to get that. But there are clearly things happening. And we all know this. And this is part of the great part of being involved in this sort of effort. So it isn't showing up yet. And even when it does, it's going to be tough to track, Bill. You know, so if the DNR, you know, decides to sell more timber, well, how exactly do we track that in terms of number, you know, jobs and so on? It'll be a little tougher to do. Okay, Bill.
Great. Thanks, Larry.
Thank you all.
Well, a testament to all of you folks, foresters are tough. There aren't a lot of groups that can get together and first thing in the morning sit down in an economic conversation. So I will applaud all of us. Larry does a great job. It was interesting when we were talking about, okay, what are we going to put? How are we going to populate the agenda? What should we do? And got a room full of folks, and who wants a forest economist? And there was Larry Peterson and Mike Vasevich and somebody else saying, we do. But I appreciate it. Larry sets a great foundation for us. How do you improve? One of the ways you improve is you make data-driven decisions, and your data has to be right. So Larry's giving us data that we can now use to move the forest products industry forward. So we appreciate that. I'm going to step out of the agenda again just quickly. I want to introduce Amy Trotter from MUCC. Amy just asked the question a minute ago. MUCC is a great partner with the Department of Natural Resources, and they're video casting this meeting, so folks that couldn't come are still able to participate. So Amy, we appreciate that. And I thought I'd make another introduction. We have a new forest products company that currently isn't in Michigan that's coming to Michigan, Aruco. So many of you folks have heard of Aruco. Kelly Schottbolt is the president of North American Operations, and he'll be our lunchtime speaker. And Brian Sargentson is a Aruco employee, somebody that I've worked with over the last couple of months, talking about what kind of wood do you have in Michigan, and where is it, and how do you get it? And so we've had some really good conversations. So I don't know that many of you folks know our new forest products company. So if you gentlemen would stand up and just so folks know who they are, use the break and other opportunities to introduce ourselves to them. And I'm really looking forward to hearing from Kelly. Why Michigan? It's a big company, worldwide company, they're everywhere. So why did they pick us? That will be a very interesting lunchtime conversation. So nice to have you gentlemen here. Thanks very much. We're going to move to continue a little bit of an economic and export conversation with my friend, Dr. Donna LaCourte. Donna has been in forest industry for a long time, started in private industry for 13 years, international paper, I believe, and traveled around the world. So worked in Russia, South America, a number of different places. Then she saw the light and came to work for the Department of Natural Resources. She was our state forester for a little while, assistant chief, and then moved to MEDC, Michigan Economic Development Corporation, and now resides in Michigan Department of Agriculture and Rural Development. She does a great job for forestry. She travels the state. So what's one of our goals? Is to take care of our existing industry. One of the ways we've chosen to do it is with Donna and MDARD working with industry. What can we do to help? What are your impediments? What are your opportunities? So Donna does a great job traveling the state. We're phone a friends. So she's going one way, I'm going the other, and we're on the phone talking about forest opportunities. So I'd like to introduce and ask Dr. Donna LaCourte to come up and talk about exports.
Well, good morning. Hopefully I can answer a couple of the questions that have already come up. I'm going to talk a little bit about the trends and resources that we have to assist companies and show a little bit about the impact that those resources have had in promoting our value-added forest products exports. Just a little start off, why export? It's really an opportunity for businesses to expand and diversify their markets. 95% of the world's consumers are outside of the U.S. The purchasing power and economic growth, the bulk of that is not in the U.S. And in fact, as I've met with several different forest products businesses over the last 3 years about export, those that have been exporting for a long time, one company in particular has been exporting since the 60s. They said they didn't even feel the economic or see the impact of the economic downturn in 2008 with that recession because they could rely on those export markets. So it's really, it has to be a good fit for a business. You don't go into export lightly. You don't go into export forgetting your domestic customers. You don't forget your export customers to serve your domestic market. So you really have to be prepared. It has to be a strategic fit. It is a balance in the overall supply chain. So although we have a goal to increase our value-added forest products exports, it has to make sense within that overall supply chain. And certainly it's impacted by the strength of the dollar. So Larry did show this slide before, and I'll talk a little bit more about this. We have seen overall for forest products exports increase in 14% since 2008, but since 2012, only about a 1% increase. Some of that is heavily impacted by the strength of the dollar in recent years. Whereas I was kind of curious, so what is it like for Michigan as a whole? Michigan's up 24% in exports since 2008, but down 2% in the last 2 years, 2012 to 2014. Mike had asked earlier, why are value-added forest products exports so low? And I think Larry did correctly state, forest products are largely commodity driven. You're all in what you can get to your customer in the lowest quartile of cost, right? That's where you have your competitive advantage. We are freight disadvantaged in Michigan, but there are niches that can be capitalized on. And in fact, I think one of the biggest ones is our lumber, our hardwood lumber. And in fact, that we've seen since 2008, wood products increased about 4%, but we're up 14% since 2012. And we'll go further through the presentation and talk a little bit about resources that are available. And I think that the resources that, especially the hardwood lumber businesses and some softwood lumber businesses as well, have utilized to capture new export markets, to grow their foreign customers, that has made the biggest impact. When you compare us to other states, we're about 6th in forest size, plus or minus 1 or 2 there, but 12th in forest products exports, looking at just paper and wood products in total. If you look at Pennsylvania, they're 14th in forest size, but they're 6th in exports. I think they're a real model for us to look at. We had a forest products export seminar 2 years ago. We had Mike Snow from the American Hardwood Export Council come and talk, and I had asked him what is a model program, and we talked about Pennsylvania, and they've had a long 20-year plus promotion program for their hardwood products. So, you know, it's something to learn from, but I think that's where we're making some gains. You know, certainly Pennsylvania is closer to that coastal area. They have some freight advantages. The big exporting states for forest products are Georgia, Washington, and California, especially with the furniture and fixtures business. So with wood products, the top trade partners, and Larry's hit it on the head, you're gonna see it in all three of the categories here. Canada's our top trade partner. Never forget about Canada. It's, you know, some people don't even think that it's exporting when you go to Canada, but yes, it is. And it's heavily impacted by the strength of the dollar. But there are things that we can talk about and work with resources to support trade and despite that. Followed by China. China has been the most significant hardwood export market for some years now. It peaked out in 2014. Probably see a drop in 2015 with the economy and issues there in China, but as I was just there a few months ago, people seem optimistic, businesses seem optimistic that it's not going to be a plunge, it's just a setback. Germany, followed by Germany, Japan, and Spain. Typically, Mexico is, for the past several years, has been the number 5, but how Spain kind of, I think, has popped into the 5th place here is in 2014. There was the World Basketball Tournament in Spain, and of course, you know, our hardwood sports surfaces is very significant in Michigan, and once you're getting down to markets that are just several $1 million, it has an impact, and Spain surged ahead. Our top paper trade partners, Canada again, a little bit different. Mexico and, you know, China is a sort of distant third, Germany, UK, and Ireland. Paper has been up about 1% since 2008, but it's up 3% since 2012. And then furniture and fixtures, and as Larry said, we can only say that wood is a significant component in this industry supply chain. Canada, again, top partner, Mexico and China. The furniture fixture industry had a significant increase of 27% since 2008, but it has dropped 3% in international exports since 2012. So a little bit about our resources. And Michigan Economic Development Corporation has been working steady and hard over the last 3 years to pull together a significant platform of export resources to support businesses across the state. And this is a key resource for forest products businesses, and I'll explain a little bit later. But Michigan has 6 centers: Canada, China, Brazil, Mexico, UK, and Germany. And all of these, with the exception of Brazil, all are very significant forest products market opportunities. They offer a wide range of services from matchmaking, market research, and even China and Mexico have something called an envoy program, where you can actually have an address and a physical presence in their offices in those countries without having to hire foreign nationals. You can have a research, a website, everything that you need to do business in a company in a country and be recognized as having a presence without some of the challenges that come with hiring foreign nationals. And if it doesn't work out, it's very hard to move away from that relationship. There are a lot of legal issues, a little bit different than here in the US. So this program is funded 100% by the MEDC, and we've had several forest products businesses make use of these services. The State Trade Export and Promotion Program, it's an awesome tool. The USDA has similar programs for food, but for forest products, we tap into this program also out of the MEDC. It allows for 50% reimbursement for market development activities that can be foreign travel to secure new customers, oversee trade missions, market research, website development, anything that you need to develop those foreign markets. And we meet with companies regularly to see if to qualify them as their eligibility. And you're going to see at the end of the presentation the results that have been tracked from this and these other programs. The U.S. Department of Agriculture works through the Foreign Agricultural Services, and they have programs through the American Hardwood Export Council. Several Michigan companies are members. The Michigan Department of Agriculture and Rural Development is a member of AHEC as well. And we participate in something called a Hardwood States Export Group. It's about 20 different states that have a predominance of hardwood and hardwood products. We participate in trade shows, we collect trade leads, and then we come back and share those with all the other states, and we distribute those in our states to our businesses that can capitalize on those trade leads. And I recently went to a trade show in China. We collect 74 trade leads for hardwood lumber and veneer, and those were distributed immediately to businesses and had feedback from at least 2 different companies that they developed new customers from that trade lead list. The Softwood Export Council, individual companies can't really become a member of this, but they do have a broad range of resources, and they stay current on the policy and the issues with softwood export. Of course, the softwood export lumber controversy with Canada, they were heavily involved in that. Associations are members, but we can tap into those resources as well. And then the USDA has a program called Branded. It's actually under the Food Export Program, but there are a few forest products commodities that don't get captured in the AHEC and the SEC that are captured under that, and that's prefabricated homes, fences, and things like pencils and some other smaller commodity products. But we can get companies to tap into those resources, which is heavily supportive of participating in endorsed trade shows abroad. So some other resources, we work closely with the U.S. Commercial Service, and Michigan has 4 export assistance centers in Detroit, Pontiac, Ypsilanti, and Grand Rapids, and they do have people that are assigned directly to the paper industry and to forest products. So if you have, especially if you have any type of trade issue, problems at the port, things like that, we can tap into those resources. Earlier, in collaboration with the USDA as well, we had some issues with some of the hardwood floors being able to get into Australia. There was requirements for heat treating, and they were being held up at the Australian port because they needed to show that they were heat treated within 48 hours, and they were able to, which is not possible to do when you're shipping by boat, by ship across the ocean. So anyway, they were able to work collaboratively with the USDA and the Commercial Service and solve the problem. The Small Business Development Center has many services that can help you build your business plan in a manner that supports both your domestic and your international market development. They have something called export milestone mapping, but it's a really good way to get a third-party person to come in, and it's really something that's really for small businesses only under 500 employees, but they really can get you to take a new look at how you can grow domestically and internationally and have a very healthy portfolio. We get market information through the Michigan Export Growth Program at MSU. Van Andel Global Trade Center also has market research that they can do, and also the American Hardwood Export Council provides that as well. So all this is about getting those informational opportunities out for companies to tap into them, to look into the markets that they're interested in pursuing, or to figure out which ones to pursue. There are numerous other export service providers that are standing ready to help. I think the Export-Import Bank is a little bit having some difficulties getting funded at the federal level right now, but the Small Business Administration has financing for export that can help you finance your production, because there's typically a longer time to payment. So we can tap you into those resources with banks, legal, and accounting firms as well. And then our MDARD phytosanitary team is a team of 30 people that work across the state to issue the permits that you need to ship your products abroad. This is something that's common for lumber, flooring. Some countries require it for flooring. Even if you have a kiln dry product, you still need to get a phytosanitary permit, except for Canada. And our team has issued in 2015 about 2,000 of these permits, and they do it in a very timely fashion. We work collaboratively with the USDA, but our team issues probably about 97% of these permits, and they've been known to have to get to the port or get to the point of departure to do the inspection in the middle of the night, and so they do a great job of getting it done, and I can't speak highly enough of them. So, Bill, you asked, do we know if anything has made a difference as to what we have done to impact the numbers? So, in collaboration with the MEDC, we have tracked results of sales results that have happened as a result of direct export assistance that we've provided through the programs that I mentioned earlier. In 2013, we had a little over 13 million, just under 13 million in 2014, and this fiscal year, which is October 1 to September 30th for 2015, $27 million. So over the last 3 years, we've had $53 million in 62 countries. Companies that receive these services will report their sales every quarter for a 2-year period following. So it has made a difference. I think the biggest bulk of that has been in the lumber, the wood products sector of forest products, but we do have resources that can help paper. We have had some paper clients, and we can work with that wood and wood fixtures businesses as well. So no company's too big, no company's too small. There's something to help everyone, and I would be very happy if you would just come my way, and we'll get you linked up with what you need to make a difference. So with that, I'll take any questions. Mike, I didn't answer your question.
No, that's all right. Can you put the last slide back?
Sure.
Yeah. I'm impressed with that slide because it shows tremendous progress. And especially what I see is the number of countries going from what? Few to a lot.
Right.
And the fact is getting an entrance into a country is huge. Building on that is fantastic. Not as huge as getting there in the first place. It seems like a great potential is to expand on the contacts. Once you're in a country, you can say, we're successfully trading with this company or that company or whatever, and we have plenty more products. I mean, I think that is a fantastic thing. The other thing, and maybe you can comment on that, the other thing was how much was going to Canada. How much of that is really being transshipped through Montreal to someplace else? I mean, is Canada the destination for that, or is it going to China and just being reloaded in Montreal?
Right. So there are probably some databases we could look at that, but I can't tell you right now. I don't know.
You don't know about Canada.
I don't know. I don't know how much goes on from Montreal, but I would guess I'd take a guess that it's not the majority of it. I don't think.
Really?
Yeah.
I mean, you'd think that if it was going someplace else, they need a phytosanitary certificate to go.
Right.
Even if it was going to Canada, unless Canada's going to issue that. But
yeah, that I'd have to dig into that further. But my guess is it's not the majority that is going on somewhere else from there.
Donna, at first pass, looking at this data, it looks like we have hit our goal of a 50% increase in exports, but that specifies value added. Do you know what portion of that $27 million is value added?
All of this is value added. So it's lumber, veneer, maybe cut stock, paper, specialty papers, and some furniture.
And from what you know, does that appear to be a sustainable number, or might this just be a blip in activity?
This is going to grow. This is not a blip. This will grow. It's just getting momentum now. But we haven't met our 50% increase. If you saw Larry's chart, I mean, we're way away from that. I think we'll always be challenged by the overarching issue of the strength of the dollar and how, so for this 27 million of increase, there's been other decreases, right? So in that overall goal, if we choose to track our overall exports in those categories, we're only about maybe 20% of our goal. So, but this 27 million, I don't think we've seen the top yet. And I think we're just starting, for instance, Indiana, they're an inland state as well, but I think they export more forest products than, if you just look at the wood product sector, than Michigan. But through the programs that we have in place with collaboration with the MEDC and reaching out to these lumber businesses, I think we're capturing some of that share and we're on the rise.
Donna, when you look at the increases, what part of the market, you talked about hardwood lumber or hardwood exports, but is it lumber, is it flooring more, is it veneer, any feel for that?
So which ones are increasing?
Yeah, basically, if you look at the biggest increases, what are the products?
Right. So I think I can't speak to Larry's overall slide, but the companies that we're working with, definitely the lumber, hardwood lumber, has made the biggest jump in the last 3 years. So it's up, even since 2012, it's up 14%. It's only up 4% from 2008, but we've, I think we're turning a corner there.
Any other sectors then?
There's opportunities for veneer, the paper sector, I think if we have a chance to meet more with our paper industry, we may find some targeted markets as well internationally. Not all of our paper producers export, but it's a fine balance because it has to make sense for the company, right? If you have a strong domestic market and that's your strategy, you have to stick with it, right? So it's perhaps there's an opportunity to identify other niche markets for all products, furniture, lumber, and paper.
Is there a way to pull out of the data the lost revenue? Because I always get concerned that we cut a log and then we get the lowest value of that log and we sell it to be made into something else in a different state or a different country, and how we can take advantage of maximizing the profit of that raw material in state instead of out of state. Do we know, or can we get our rub a little pause on that data?
Sort of the potential is what
you're. Yeah, I mean, it just rubs me the wrong way to take a tree and ship it somewhere else, and 90% of the value goes to an out of state or an out of country place. So I'd like to do that in Michigan.
I think we can look at that, and especially with some of the work that the Elward Institute will talk about later. You can see where we're exporting that value and whether there's opportunity to increase that value-added opportunity in Michigan as opposed to Wisconsin or Indiana. I think we can look at that.
That's in your data. So we asked all these questions. We got the right people here, and notice that's good. Because it just, I mean, there's value.
You want to take one more question now?
Any more questions? Mike.
JR, it's worse than that. My office at home is paneled in red oak. Okay, it's beautiful. I bought the red oak paneling. It's 1/4-inch paneling. I bought it years ago. When I got it home, I stacked it up in the basement, and my wife had a look at it. She says, "It's beautiful." I looked at the edge. It said, "Made in Korea." We were shipping the logs to Korea.
That sort of stuff.
They were being manufactured into plywood and shipped back to
So I did,
that sort of stuff.
It's not on this slide, but I did, there is something called forestry. It's a NAICS code 113, and you can look at it. It has a number of things, but that's where the logs are. And actually log exports have been, from Michigan, have been down. Maybe that's good. Yeah. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Paul. A couple of weeks ago, I went to the Navy Notre Dame football game with my sons and a bunch of Irish cousins, and so we're walking through the tailgate section, and geez, I see this really fancy tailgate party going on. They had trailers, they had this great beer truck with multiple spigots coming out, and I just kind of gravitated that way for some unknown reason. Then I looked, and it says Great Lakes Forest Products. And I thought, wow, the fanciest tailgate thing at Notre Dame University is a Forest Products. Kept looking at the beer thing, and I thought maybe I should go introduce myself. So all my cousins are yelling at me saying, we know why you're going over there, it's got nothing to do with wood. But I went over, introduced myself, and I didn't know who they were. It was a company out of Elkhart, Indiana, and they made outdoor furniture. And if you judge by their tailgating accommodations, they're very successful. So we're talking, I said, where do you get your wood? Well, we get all our wood from Canada. So you don't get any wood from Michigan? No. Have you ever heard of Beaver lumber? No. And most of what they built, or most of what they used, was softwood. So have you ever heard of potlatch? Yep, we heard of potlatch. You ever get any wood out of potlatch? No, we didn't. So we exchanged information. I just thought it was interesting that here we were, not very far from our border, with a successful wood products company, yet they weren't getting the wood from Michigan. So they got great wings. The whole beer truck worked like a charm, but just an interesting antidote. So we're time for a break. We're going to take 20 minutes. We'll bring you back in. We've got a great couple of panels that are going to talk later on in the morning, and we'll continue the conversation.